Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai.
My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. My Father which gave them me is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand.
Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Mecha Kodash. Yahweh is the name of the Heavenly Father in the ancient Hebrew, and Yahweh Shai is the name of His only begotten Son, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Alright, the Savior of the nation of Israel, starting with the elect. I want to give double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. Just a continuation, alright, of Daniel the 11th chapter, really from verse 8, really 7 and 8. Alright, now, just to recap from, because we've already gone over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, okay, but in the beginning, alright, starting in Daniel 11 and 1, we start off where, the angel's basically telling Daniel here what's going to happen, what the prophecy is going to be, and this is mainly focusing on the time period, all right, from Cyrus, from the Achaemenid Empire, all right, onto the fall of that empire, onto the rise of the Greek Empire, onto the wars, the Syrian wars between, all right, some of the Greek generals. Okay, so in 11 and 1, it's pretty self-explanatory. The four kings here in the second verse, all right, we know starts with Cambyses II, all right, followed by Bardia or Smerdis, and then Darius, all right, they call him Darius the Great, and then followed by Xerxes. Okay, those were the four kings in the second verse. The mighty king that shall stand up was Alexander the Great. All right, once again, I've already done videos on this, so what I'll do is, Lord willing, I'll put it into a playlist. All right, so when you go to the playlist section, all right, you'll be able to see it on there. Okay, verse 4 is going into Alexander, basically dying, all right, after conquering all that land and basically raising up that Greek Empire. All right, he died, and his kingdom was divided towards his generals. Okay, and then it goes into verse 5, where now it starts to focus more, all right, on the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. Okay, so as you can see here, it goes into the king of the south, which is Ptolemy, but it starts with Ptolemy the first Soter, which means savior. Okay, and then it goes in verse 6, it goes into the I believe this was the second Syrian war, all right, which was between Ptolemy Philadelphus, all right, and Antiochus Theos, all right. So it says at the end of years, this was the ending of the second Syrian war, where they came to make an agreement, basically a peace agreement, all right. So now focusing on verse 7, because where we left off in verse 6, what had happened was Ptolemy Philadelphus, all right, the king of Egypt at the time, had made an agreement with Antiochus II Theos, which was the Seleucid king, all right, at the time. And to end that Syrian war that they were having, the agreement, as we can read in Daniel 11 and 6, says, and in the end of years, they shall join themselves together. Who's that they? The king of the south and the king of the north. All right. It says, for the king's daughter of the south, which was the daughter of Ptolemy Philadelphus, and that was Berenice. All right. Pharnaphorus, okay, which means dowry bearer. All right, so the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, which was that peace agreement, and it was through marriage. But she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm. But she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. And the way that actually happened through the secular history was Antiochus, in order to marry Berenice, he ended up leaving his previous wife Laodice. Okay, now after Antiochus married Berenice, after a while he wanted to go back to Laodice. All right, however, having two wives and children by those two wives, Antiochus goes to Laodicea and gets poisoned, gets put to death. And now you have two wives who are now going back and forth about whose son is going to become the king. Okay, and in all of this, that's how it leads us to verse 7, because it says here, but out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate. Now that out of a branch of her roots was going into one of her relatives, all right, which namely is Ptolemy the third, okay, Euergetes, all right, which is the brother of Berenice. Okay, so upon his arrival there to help his sister put her son, on the throne as the king, he finds out, as we're going to read, that she was what? She was murdered, okay, along with their son. Okay, so as it says in verse 7, but out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, and that was Ptolemy the third Euergetes, all right, which shall come with an army and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north. So he came up, to northern Syria, Antioch, Seleucia, Pierre, going up there into Asia Minor, all right, to the fortress of the king of the north, the Seleucids territory. It says, and shall deal against them and shall prevail. And this was the third Syrian war, otherwise known as the Laodicean War. Okay, so now when you go here, which is, like I said, it's all just secular history, and it's just about linking it, with the scriptures. So when you go here to the third Syrian war, first let's read it. Let's read about Ptolemy the third. It says, Ptolemy the third Euergetes, or which that means benefactor. Okay, was the third king of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt from 246 to 222 BC. The first king was Ptolemy the first Soter, followed by Ptolemy the second Philadelphus, followed by Ptolemy the third Euergetes. All right. It says the Ptolemaic kingdom reached the height of its power during his reign. Ptolemy the third was the eldest son of Ptolemy the second Philadelphus and his wife Arsinoe the first. When Ptolemy the third was young, his mother was disgraced, and he was removed from the succession. He was restored as heir to the throne in the late 250s BC, and succeeded his father as king without issue in 246 BC. On his succession, Ptolemy married Berenice II. This isn't his sister. This isn't the Berenice that was married off to Antiochus. All right, it's just they have the same name, but that's why it says here the second. Okay, reigning queen of Cyrenaica, thereby bringing her territory into the Ptolemaic realm. In the third Syrian war, which we're about to read about, Ptolemy III invaded the Seleucid Empire and won a near total victory. And that's what we read here. Okay, it says here that which shall come up with an army and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north. And the king of the north being the Seleucids. Okay, it says here he invaded the Seleucid Empire. Okay, where am I at? All right, and won a near total victory. All right, now he won the war, the Syrian war against, the Seleucids. All right, and namely at the time, the king he was going up against was Seleucus II. All right, we're going to read about that as well. Okay, so it says here, and won a near total victory, but was forced to abandon the campaign as a result of an uprising in Egypt. Now, understand what's happening in Egypt at the time is you have Edomites, because this Ptolemy III Euergetes was an Edomite. Look at his face. All right, he wasn't a native Egyptian. He wasn't a Hamite. All right, but in the land of Egypt, that's where you had Mizraim, right? That's where the native Egyptians were. But when Alexander was conquering, he had taken over all of these lands. And what happened when they take over these lands? The natives of those lands become subject to those rulers. So when Ptolemy, going back to his grandfather, Ptolemy the first Soter, was awarded that portion of Egypt, he had control over that area. So now you had Edomites ruling over native Egyptians, similar to the Neo-Babylonian Empire. All right, which you started with the father of Nebuchadnezzar, Nabopolassar. Okay, Nabopolassar was an Assyrian. Okay, and so was Nebuchadnezzar. He was an Assyrian. All right, However, they were Assyrians ruling over, that conglomerate of different people, majority Cushites and, so on and so forth. All right, these Hamitic families. All right, but in ancient Babylon was also somewhat of a melting pot. So it wasn't just a specific, one kind of people there. However, it was one people ruling over another. Okay, same thing here in Egypt. You had the Edomites that were ruling over the native Egyptians. So as a result of that, there was an uprising in Egypt. Because when you have a ruler over you, if you guys are not at peace, working together, then it's one over the other. And eventually what will happen? You will have those that are on the bottom say, look, we want to revolt. We don't want these people over us. And that's what Pharaoh feared. Matter of fact, let's get a precept. All right, this is why, okay, in the book of Exodus, it says here, let us deal wisely. I believe it's the first chapter. Okay, this is the book of Exodus, chapter 1, verse 8. Okay, it says, now there arose a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, so get them up out of the land. All right, now it's a similar situation, not quite the exact same, because we were the ones in a foreign land. However, this is the mindset he had. Hey, look, let's keep them under subjection, lest whenever the opportunity rises, right, they fall out any war, they join our enemies and basically uprise and revolt against us. So what's happening here in Egypt, which is why Ptolemy had to be had to abandon the campaign, is because the native Egyptians were uprising. Right? It says, in the aftermath of this rebellion, Ptolemy forged a closer bond with the Egyptian priestly elite, because in Egypt you had, going back to Ptolemy the First, you had they tried to unify their religions, their deities. All right, so they can have that closer bond, and I believe it was Ptolemy Soter who moved or set up in Memphis sort of like a unification of like a priestly temple for them, for Serapis Christus, so they tried to through that deity. All right, through their religion or their customs and belief is how they try to form that unification, to have some form of common bond or ground over there. So it says here, which was codified in the Canopus decree. All right. Okay, it says here of 238 BC, and set a trend for Ptolemaic power in Egypt for the rest of the dynasty. Now, this wasn't the first revolt. Of course, there were going to be more later on, which we'll cover. All right. It says, in the Aegean, Ptolemy suffered a major setback. So, once again, one thing also is to pull up, the images, right? So let's look up the Aegean Sea on the world map. All right. So you know what you're looking at. Okay. Let's see. All right. Here's a good one. So the Aegean Sea is right here. Okay, you have the Black Sea here, you have the Mediterranean, all right, and then right here you have the Aegean, which you have the little islands around here, all right, the Cycladic Islands, okay. Now, Ptolemy having Egypt, he also had control over this area, going back to the time of, Ptolemy the First Soter, going back to the time of when they had that, the generals were fighting amongst each other, and they were fighting against Antigonus and so on and so forth. Ptolemy had control over this area through proxy, all right, and different areas as well. Okay, so it says, when we're reading about it, it says here that in the Aegean he suffered major setbacks when his fleet was defeated by the Antagonists at the Battle of Andros in 245 BC, but he continued to offer financial support to their opponents in mainland Greece for the rest of his reign. All right, at his death, Ptolemy was succeeded by his eldest son, Ptolemy IV Philopator. Okay, so you basically, this, when it says Aegean, or when they mention these locations, it's always good to look it up, because we're familiar with, okay, Jerusalem, Israel over here, but the Near East, a lot of things happen around here as well. Okay, so it's good to know, it's a part of geography. You got to know these things, if you want to understand, all right, what you're reading. Okay, you have to be able to picture the locations that are being mentioned. Okay, so now let's go to the Third Syrian War, because that's what we're reading about in Daniel 11, verse 7. So it says here, and we're only going to read the top part. In July 246 BC, Antiochus II Theos, king of the Seleucid Empire, died suddenly. By his first wife, Laodice I, Antiochus had a son. Now he died because she had him put to death. Some say that she poisoned him, so on and so forth. All right, so by his first wife, Laodice I, which that's where you get Laodicea, it was named after her. Okay, and Antioch was named after Antiochus. Okay, Alexandria named after Alexander. So anyway, Antiochus had a son. All right, Seleucus II, which his name was that Callinicus Pogan. Okay, it says who was about 19 years old in 246 BC. However, in 253 BC, he had agreed to repudiate Laodice and marry Ptolemy III's eldest sister, Berenice Pharnaphorus. This is Daniel 11 verse 6, the agreement that was made, okay, between the king of the south. He brought his daughter to the king of the north. That's what we're reading here. All right, Antiochus Theos repudiated his previous wife so he can marry Ptolemy III's eldest sister, all right, aka Berenice, which was the daughter of Ptolemy II. All right, it says by her he had another son named Antiochus. So his previous wife, by his previous wife, he has a son, Seleucus II Callinicus, and then by his new wife, Berenice, all right, he has a son named Antiochus, who was still an infant in 246 BC. A succession dispute broke out immediately after Antiochus II's death. Why? Because now everybody's like, yo, well, it's my son. No, it's my son who's going to be king. They're going back and forth. Ptolemy III quickly invaded Syria in support of his sister and her son. Okay, it says here, but out of a branch of her roots. Who's the her? Berenice. All right, shall stand up one in his estate. That was her brother, Ptolemy III, which shall come with an army and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north. Okay, so that's what we're reading here. It says he quickly invaded Syria in support of his sister and her son, marking the beginning of the Third Syrian War, also known as the Laodicean War. An account of the initial phase of this war, written by Ptolemy III himself, is preserved in the Gura Papyrus. At the outbreak of war, Laodice and Seleucus were based in Western Asia Minor. All right, so that's around this area. Okay, which was basically given to her by Antiochus after he had sent her away. He gave her that portion. That's why Laodicea, which is around that area, was named after her. All right, so keep reading. It says, Asia Minor, while Berenice Pharnaphorus was in Antioch. Okay, so which it should be in Syria. Let's just look it up. Antioch map, and Antioch, you hear about it also in the New Testament. Okay, so as you can see, Antioch is right here, right at the coast. Okay, now if you were to do, let's say you go to the blue letter and you do a word search, Antioch, it says what? There's one that says the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. Okay, so because now, why is this mentioned so much? Because this land is literally, it's also the disciples would travel through here. Okay, they would travel through here. Damascus, I believe Paul was on his way there when he got knocked off his horse. Okay, so you had certain disciples all around here. Okay, so that's why you'll see it many times in the scriptures. Now this is going back to how it was established. It was named after so on and so forth. Okay, so it's not by coincidence if you've come across this and you're like, that sounds like Antiochus. Well, It's named after him. Okay, so going back to the point, the latter quickly seized control of Cilicia to prevent Laodice from entering Syria. Okay, so now let's look at that. Okay, Cilicia, map. Now I believe, let's see, Tarsus, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's where it says, there it is, Acts 22:3, which is Paul. Yep, Tarsus is in Cilicia. All right, not to be confused with Sicily. Okay, two different areas. This is Cilicia. This is Acts 22:3. This is Paul speaking here, and he says, I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia. All right, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward the Most High, as ye are all this day. So Paul was learned, but dealing with Cilicia, all right, which is in Asia Minor. If I could get a good map of it. Okay, this is not bad. Okay, Cilicia, Tarsus is right here. So that's where Paul was born. Okay, so you have Syria, okay, as you can see here, and then you have Cilicia, you have Lycaonia, and all these different areas here in Asia Minor. All right, so as we're reading, they took over, where does it say that? Okay, it says here, the latter quickly seized control of Cilicia to prevent Laodice from entering Syria. Okay, so if they had control over this area, Laodice couldn't get into Syria, which is where what's her name? Berenice was. Okay, it says Ptolemy III marched along the Levantine coast, encountering minimal resistance. The cities of Seleucia and Antioch surrendered to him without a fight in late autumn. At Antioch, Ptolemy III went to the royal palace to plan his next moves with Berenice in person, only to discover that she and her young son had been murdered. Rather than accept defeat in the face of this setback, Ptolemy III continued in his campaign through Syria into Mesopotamia, where he conquered Babylon at the end of 246 or the beginning of 245. So this is going into him moving more eastward. All right, but let's go here to the Third Syrian War, which this is another account of it. All right, of the actual war between Ptolemy and Seleucus II. So it says here, the Third Syrian War, also known as the Laodicean War. The Third Syrian War began with one of many succession crises that plagued the Hellenistic states. Antiochus II left two ambitious mothers, his repudiated wife Laodice and Ptolemy's daughter Berenice Syra, in a competition to put their respective sons on the throne, which we covered that. Laodice claimed that Antiochus had named her son heir while on his deathbed, but Berenice argued that her newly born son was the legitimate heir. So they're going back and forth. Baby mama drama. It says, Berenice asked her brother, Ptolemy III, the new Ptolemaic king, all right, remember it says he shall stand up in his estate, okay, the new Ptolemaic king, to come to Antioch and to help place her son on the throne. When Ptolemy arrived, Berenice and her child had been assassinated. Ptolemy declared war on Laodice's newly crowned son, Seleucus II Callinicus, in 246 BC, and campaigned with great success, his forces possibly being commanded by Xanthippus of Sparta, aka Xanthippus of Carthage, the mercenary general responsible for defeating a Roman army at Tunis, Bagrades in 255. He won major victories over Seleucus in Syria and Anatolia, briefly occupied Antioch, and as a recent cuneiform discovery proves, even reached Babylon, which we were reading about earlier. These victories were marred by the loss of the Cyclades to Antigonus Gonatas in the Battle of Andros. Seleucus had his own difficulties. His domineering mother asked him to grant co-regency to his younger brother Antiochus Hyrax, as well as rule over Seleucid territories in Anatolia. So now what's going on? You have the war between Ptolemy. He's declaring war on the Seleucids, and the current king is Seleucus II, right? So they're going to war, and all this is happening, and then Seleucus's mother is like, well, you got to give your younger brother some form of, something, all right? So he's like, all right. He ends up giving Antiochus Hyrax, which was his younger brother, rule over certain territories in Asia Minor, in Anatolia. And let's see what happens after that. Antiochus promptly declared independence. So after he gave his brother that portion, his brother was like, I'm out. All right, peace. Do you. It says, undermining Seleucus's efforts to defend against Ptolemy. So instead of uniting with his brother, so that they can take on Ptolemy, he was like, yo, bro, this is all you. I'm going to go, declare independence and go do my thing over there. So now that basically put Seleucus at a disadvantage in that war. So it says here, in exchange for peace in 241 BC, Ptolemy was awarded new territories on the northern coast of Syria, including Seleucia Pieria, the port of Antioch. The Ptolemaic kingdom was at the height of its power. All right, and so that's what we're reading about here, that he shall, enter into the fortress of the king of the north. All right, and that was Ptolemy Euergetes invading the Seleucid territory and going to war with Seleucus II. All right, Callinicus. It says, and shall deal against them, which was that war we just read about, and shall prevail. All right, which he won the war, as we just read. Verse 8, and shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods, with their princes, and with precious vessels of silver and of gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. All right, when you look, and that's basically going into their idols. All right, that he basically brought back the gold and the idols and the molten images and so on and so forth. That's why they called him a benefactor. Okay, because some of these idols and stuff, due to previous rulers who had conquered Egypt, they took, just like the Nebuchadnezzar, when they destroyed Jerusalem, took the golden vessels and the cups and the vessels of the Lord to Babylon. Some of these different rulers, when they took over Egypt, moved and took some of these vessels up to the different locations, whether it's in Syria or in Asia Minor or wherever they had control over. So Ptolemy going over there is he gets, after he gets that victory, he's bringing some of these things back, and so they call him a benefactor. Now, when you look up the word princess, one of the definitions here will tell you is a molten image. Okay, so it wasn't like an actual person per se. Okay, but like it says here, precious vessels of silver and gold, and it says, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Now let's compare the dates of these two kings. You had Ptolemy Euergetes, all right, who was against Seleucus II. All right, so in this verse, the king of the north is this guy Seleucus, and the king of the south is Ptolemy Euergetes. Now it says that Ptolemy died. He died November or December 222 BC. Okay, and when we look up here at when Seleucus II died, all right, it says here he died December 225 BC. Okay, so he died before, all right, Ptolemy III Euergetes, because BC meaning you're counting downward. All right, so 225, you would count down 224, 223, 222. So that's 3 years later is when Ptolemy died. As it says, he continued more years than the king of the north. Okay, it says, so the king of the south shall come into his kingdom and shall return into his own land. All right, basically as we just read, he returned. But we're gonna stop here, for today. Lord willing, that was, linking that secular to it. As I always say, man, it's a lot of information. That's why I broke it down, and I'm not even giving every single detail, but I just broke it down to make it a little easier to understand. Okay, but Lord willing, next time, we'll pick up from verse 10, going into the sons, all right, of Seleucus II, because that's what it was. It was like a wars from there, a succession of wars from this guy, his son, his son's son, his son's son, so on and so forth. And that eventually leads, all right, to the emergence of Antiochus Epiphanes, which another big portion of Daniel 11 focuses on Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, now before we close it, because the scriptures tell you, because he played a key role in the destruction of Israel. Okay, let's see. I think in First Maccabees, first chapter. Okay, there we go. First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule everyone in his place. And after his death they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth, as we're reading about it. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus surnamed Epiphanes. All right, and as we read on down, we're gonna come across, all right, that demon Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, but he came from this Seleucid line. That's why it says here, out of them came a wicked root, Antiochus surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king. This is why it's important to know that, like for example, Antiochus is not a name of one person per se. It's sort of like a throne name or a title. Okay. So you might say, well, Antiochus Epiphanes, the son of Antiochus. What do you mean? There's two different people. Okay, but we'll get to that. Who had been in hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Once again, we'll get to that as well. Okay, so like I said, we're going to end it off here. And Lord willing, next time we'll pick up from verse 10. All right, so with that, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakakodash. Hey, as Apostle R said, in order to I'm gonna butcher it a bit, but in order to know the mystery, or to get the mystery, you got to know the history. All right, so with that, shalom.